And we are back. And as promised, on the line with us this morning is our Congressman, Jodey Arrington. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Dave. Good morning, Matt. Good to be
morning.
with you guys.
Yeah, it's good to hear from you. Now, I mean, just to start and get this out of the way, we had a mass shooting here in Texas. Just a horrible thing there in Odessa, and I know that's something you may want to address a little bit.
Well, I mean, like you said, it was absolutely horrible, and I think wherever those occur in the country, our hearts are broken, and we need to pray for those families and the victims, and that community, because it's a terrorizing experience. I went to El Paso for the memorial service, and they're a strong community, and they're going to come out of this stronger and closer. But it's we obviously wish that it would have never happened and they would never have to go through this. But there are obviously people that are deranged and people who are hell bent on murder and destruction, and we have to be prepared to do everything we can to prevent it and to stop it as quickly as we can when it starts. I think law enforcement in every case, including and especially Dayton, Ohio, but all the way through to the folks in Midland and Odessa, did a fantastic job, and these guys risked their lives. So, we also want to give a shout out to the local law enforcement for their good work. But it's scary. In this case, we're getting more details, every seems like minute by minute on this perpetrator. But I'll stop there and let you drill down on any specifics.
Well, here's Matt and I were talking about this just a while ago, and then we talked about it last week. But I'm of the opinion, just anecdotally, as I see and watch the news, it seems to me like there is, at least it appears to me, that there is. We're building to a point where we're going to have to do something with regards to gun legislation. Right or wrong, it just seems like that there is just a momentum to do that. Do you agree with me, or what do you think?
Well, I think that we need to do everything we can that will get at the issues and of the real prevention. I think, for example, the background check legislation that came through the House that was a Democrat partisan bill, that's H.R. 8 is what it's referred to, which is in the Senate, would not have stopped any of the mass shootings as of recent. The Dayton, the El Paso, and Odessa, none of those would have been stopped by this legislation. I'm interested in doing everything we can, but I'm not interested in doing things that just make us feel better.
And I agree with you. Nothing that I have heard, it seems to me that it's going to make any statistical difference. I mean, even if you took away all the AR-15s, there are still other guns that will fire the same ammunition and will that are semi-automatic like that. But it just seems like that the public wants something. Now, I've seen polls that said something along the lines of 90% of Americans want to see something done.
I want to see something.
I don't know about polls.
I want to see them make it where reciprocity is forced upon places like New York City that don't allow guns at all. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, how about, we have driver's license where there's reciprocity when you go into other states and communities. Why not have law-abiding folks who can defend themselves and their families? I agree with you, Matt, but let me just get back real quick to the things that are being bandied about. In 1994, we had an assault weapons ban by the federal government. It lasted 10 years. It included high-capacity magazines. And the government, not the NRA, not Fox News, but the government, did a report, sort of an impact analysis, and they said there was no discernible impact on the number of mass shootings, on the scope and scale of injury with murders or crimes committed with guns. So they lifted that ban. So I do think that there are things that we can do and should do. I don't know that it's going to stop somebody like the guy in Odessa, for example, and apparently he failed a background check to purchase a gun. But like 80% of people who are out of their minds and want to commit these atrocities, they do it with guns that they either borrow or steal or buy on the black market. So even if we have a perfect criminal background check system, it won't stop these guys in 80% of the cases. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't have all the current and relevant data in our background check system. And I am definitely committed to doing that and closing any gaps there. But regulating or banning firearms is something that I think is the knee-jerk reaction that generally puts law-abiding citizens in a more vulnerable position and doesn't really get at prevention and has no real impact on these things. Now, red flag laws are going to be, I think, at the heart of the discussion, which is, can we intervene and expeditiously provide some adjudicating process by which we can take someone's guns who we think is a threat to themselves or to the public, an immediate threat. I think that's going to be front and center of the debate. And the question is, can you do that and protect people's due process? Can you do that without it being fraught with abuse for neighbors and ex-boyfriends and girlfriends and other, folks that could make calls and accusations that were false? And I think that's really I think that's going to be a lot of the discussion is, can there be a red flag law that could get at preventing some of these shootings? 17 states have them. I like the idea of states deciding what kind of red flag laws, if they should have them, what kind they should have, because they vary state by state. Some are more loosely written, and I would never accept that in my state or my country. In fact, I think that they violate the Constitution and people's due process rights. But in other cases, I think there are more controls in place to prevent the kind of abuse that I think most people worry about.
I'm personally pretty much 100% against red flag laws, as most of the states implement them. I think the big thing is that as a gun owner, you should have the right to at least go in front of a judge and plead your own case and face your own accuser prior to them being able to take them away. Now, it may be that you have to, if the judge decides so, that you aren't allowed out of the courtroom until they get your guns. But, I mean, in the end, I think that you have to, if for due process, you have to be able to personally stand in front of a judge. If they're just taking the word of everybody else, then that's not really a fair system.
Well, I agree with you, Matt. I think there are a number of things that I'm looking at that are problematic, but one of them is what you mentioned, being able to face your accuser, being able to plead your case before a judge or jury. But, in the case, for example, I sat next to a lady on the airplane who's a child welfare expert, and she described the process whereby the state can search and seize your child in the case where the child is under sort of imminent threat from the parents or the caretaker, and when they take the child away from that dangerous situation, the law enforcement and caseworker have 24 hours to convince a judge that they need longer. Then they get 10 days, and then the parent or the whoever is the caretaker, legal guardian, can plead their case within that 10 days. And if they don't do that in 10 days, the children come back. So even with a child, forget a gun. This is your child. This is probably should be the highest standard for due process. almost every state, including Texas, has a system where you can expeditiously determine if someone is an imminent threat to the public, or someone is, in the case of a child, is within the imminent threat of their guardian. So,
okay, Congressman, we got up against a hard break, or up against a break here. Let's take that break and come back then and close things out. Okay.
You got it.
All right.
Thanks.
Be back in a moment with more. 95.1 FM and 790 AM, KFYO Mornings, Dave and Matt on your radio, and with Congressman Arrington this morning on the phone.
Congressman, I've been watching this because it seems very concerning to me. I see the freedom being taken away from a whole group of people, and that's with Hong Kong. Is there anything that the U.S. can do to during this situation? Congressman?
Look,
oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, I think this is another case where, we're dealing with China on trade, and China's not just a bad actor when it comes to stealing intellectual property and distorting markets and just being a bad trade partner. China is a bad country because of its government, and it's one of the greatest human rights perpetrators in the world. And what I don't know if America should involve themselves in Hong Kong other than in statements. And I do think human rights should be of consideration when we're talking about reset and what we expect from China before we do business with them. And to that extent, I think we should include Hong Kong, but we can't be the world's police. It's unfortunate what's happening, but this is the way China treats its quote-unquote subjects. They don't treat them as citizens, as free people like we do. And, the President Xi decided that he didn't need to go through the election process anymore, so now he's the emperor, and they're his subjects. And that is the nation that we're dealing with when we're working with them on any front. So it's a complicated issue. I think human rights should be included in our discussions when we talk about should we be doing business with China.
So if China was the size of Cuba, we wouldn't do trade with them. I mean, we would treat them like Cuba. So
Matt, you're right on, and I've said those very words, that if we don't do business with Cuba and we beat our chest when we talk about doing business with Cuba and say, how could we go to Castro's Cuba where there's so much abuse and human rights violations in this communist authoritarian regime? Well, you're right. It's the difference is the number of people. This China market is 1 billion people. It's the largest market in the world. But America is supposed to be above that. We're supposed to be more than just a military and economic superpower. We're supposed to be the moral leaders of the world. So I think those should be included in discussions if we are to restart any business deal with them. And otherwise, we need to also be thinking about pushing that business to other countries like the new free trade agreement in principle with Japan. We need to be doing other free trade deals in the Asia-Pacific region so that we don't need for all that we have with China now because of the years.
I know that India is a very large country as well. They still have a lot of poverty there. Would we not be able to get cheap labor there as well? And wouldn't they be easier to work with?
Yeah, I don't think the issue is cheap labor. In some cases with Mexico, cheap labor has been the problem and why we've heard a giant sucking sound of manufacturing jobs going to Mexico, leaving this country. But yeah, I think it's a large customer base. It's a large market. And you're right. If you look at that country and others throughout the Eastern world, and like I said, the Japan deal is a $7 billion opportunity. But even with Europe and Britain, with the Brexit, I mean, there are all kinds of opportunities. So I think the fundamental question that you asked is a great question. Why are we doing business with China in the first place, other than it's a big market?
Congressman, we are out of time, up against a hard break. Always love talking to you.
Likewise, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks for your
thanks,
time.
Congressman.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.